Alright, so I got a piece of charcoal that came out of a fire pit out here that I threw a spark into, and it's still glowing. I got some sphagnum moss that I've been letting dry in my shirt for the last few hours. I combine them. Just drop that charcoal. Luckily it's right here glowing. I'm going to put it back in there. There we go. Don't need to use cedar bark, doesn't need to be pine needles, doesn't need to be birch bark. Just with a spark, piece of old charcoal from an old fire. Some old moss has been drying out in my shirt for the last few hours. Not too hard at all. That'll make a fire. So this is a little marsh behind me, and I decided I want to make a twig bundle fire. And one of the things I like to do about twig bundles is to lash it down in one place. Well, there's no point using string that's going to melt or burn away, go to waste, when there's so many easily accessible roots out here in the bush. In fact, there's a couple of nice ones right here. I'm just going to follow them along. If this was the root in the dirt, I'm going to take my stick, go along the side of it just to loosen it from the dirt. I'm just going along, observing where the roots all kind of intertwine. Here's a decent one right here. And it's already come up to the surface a bit. So I'm just going to go along with it. It's a real nice one, actually. Hopefully I'll get all 6 feet. The great thing, if you're in a boreal bog like a sphagnum bog, or a moss bog as some people like to call them, it's really easy to just go out and find the perfect root and kind of just lift it right up out of the ground, because it's all just moss. But in central Ontario, this boreal ecosystem here, covered with Canadian shield, there's not much of a luck here. We don't have much of a sphagnum bog in this area. So you have to work with where you can work best, and that is just on the surface of the rocks in these little balsam fir forests. So I'm just going along, because what happens is the rocks in the ground, it makes the ground so shallow that the roots can't really go deep. So you can find them pretty close to the surface here. So you can see it goes all the way back to here. I'm going to cut it off the main root. And this is probably, from the looks of it, I'm guessing it's cedar. Just because we are close to quite a few cedars, and cedar get these really nice reddish colors on their roots. At least the cedars I know, eastern white cedar. Going along. And for this kind of a project, any root will do the job. Spruce root, balsam root, pine, tamarack, cedar, fir, any of them will work. But the great thing about this project is it's burnable, so I don't have to make this perfect. That's about all I've got, and that's 3 or 4 feet, closer to 3 I think. That's good enough for what I need. Now there's a couple of cool little tricks I'm going to show you. I'm going to sit here. I've got 2 sticks. One of them is my little digger. As you can see, I sharpened the end of it. And this is just a branch off that dead balsam tree over here. What you can do with these 2 is clamp them together with the root in between and pull a couple of times. And you can see that the root bark is starting to come off. When making baskets, or for either birch bark baskets or for weaving, it's better to take the bark off. Same with birch bark canoes, anything like that. You want to take the bark off, because the bark makes the root fairly brittle and it doesn't flex very well afterwards, and it doesn't take to water very well. So what I'm doing is I'm taking these pieces of wood, clamping it in between, pulling on it, and you see that the bark is popping off. It's a little later in the season than I'm used to doing this, and it's not the best time of year to be doing this. coming into the fall. But it works fairly well, as you can see. Works even better in the springtime. Holy smokes, it almost flies off the root. People ask all the time, how do you split roots? It's not that hard. What you do, you start, I like to start on the thickest end. Some people say start on the thinner end, because there's always a thick end and a thin end to the root. I like to start on the thick end, and you can either use a knife, your fingernail, or I actually just bite it in half, like such. And I've got two ends. Those two ends I put into both hands, like that. Thumb there, and I actually rock on my knuckles. Now if you see, one end is thinner than the other. What I can do then is pull on the thicker end, on the thicker side, until it rights itself and they're about even. And I just keep following that along, rocking it on my knuckles, pulling more on the thicker end whenever it starts to thin out on one side. You can't always do it perfect, but it's a good practice, especially if you want to start getting into canoe making or basket making. You'll learn how to do this. Other ways you can do it is with a crooked knife, just right down the middle, but this is how I grew up doing it. This is how I was taught to do it. And we used to use spruce roots and cedar roots and pine roots for a lot of different projects. Cornucopias around Thanksgiving. I'd make them up and sell them at some of the craft shops back home. You can also make cool dream catchers and medicine wheels with this stuff. So there's some. I had a couple more that I split earlier, much shorter. As you can see, they don't always come up perfectly straight. They're real wonky. But those are my roots. That's how you split them, that's how you harvest them. I'm going to use this to go make a twig fire and show you how to do that next. Got some birch bark. I actually got a lot of birch bark. Got some cedar and balsam roots. And I got some balsam twigs. Basically, it's a medium-sized bundle. And what I do is I walk through the bush. As I gather them, I put one into one hand, keep breaking off branches, adding them on, walking along until I got a bundle that's called a small hug. If you have a group of people or you have somebody that's hypothermic, you have a big hug, and that's what you need to get it lit to make sure that they're warm fast. There's a lot of heat that's going to keep going. What we do with this is for if I want to get a cooking fire going in the cold, wet weather. This is about the size I need. And there's two layers to this. This is the one layer and this is the other layer. This is the thicker sticks. They're on the outside. And the thinner sticks, and I laid this on my canvas here, the thinner sticks go on top. What that does is, as if I have to put it down for a moment, the thicker sticks will get wet, not the thinner sticks, and they're really the ones that have to stay dry. Adding to that is birch bark. There's a birch tree that fell down years and years ago down there. This bark is a little damp, so what you can do if you're traveling is tuck it inside your shirt, especially these wool jackets like this one. This is a boreal shirt by Empire Canvas Works. I think Leicester River Bushcraft sells them. But anyways, your heat and the breathable material will help the moisture actually evaporate over time. If you don't have that much time, luckily it's birch bark, it's fairly waterproof, so it will burn most of the time when damp. But what that does mean is if you're concerned about it actually being able to light, is shake it a bit, try and get off any residual moisture that's on the outside. You can actually feel some of it sprinkling it off, which is never a good sign for lighting a fire. But if you have a bundle that's about the size of a softball, it should light no matter what, and that's a good amount of tinder, or in this case, coarse tinder, to light the fire. If I wanted to show off, I could pull out my fire piston, or I could pull out a ferro rod or flint and steel. Really impress, you can use a bow drill or a hand drill. I'm not really here to impress, so I got a lighter. So what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to set this aside for a moment on the rock so it stays fairly dry. My lighter is out here in the open. I take my twig bundle, bring it all together, and I bend it in half. Like that. Often breaking it. You'll hear a lot of snaps and aches and pains, like somebody with arthritis. And what that does is now got a little pocket in here at the bend. That pocket's where we're going to put the birch bark. Before we do that though, I want to make sure this thing stays shut. So I take one of those roots that I gathered, tie it around here, give it a good tie. In this case I'm going to use a surgeon's knot just to make sure I don't strain the root too badly like that. There we go. That'll hold it shut so it doesn't pop open on me while it burns. Take my softball of birch bark, and it's again a little damp. This stuff's a little damp as well, just because it's been out in the air and it's been raining lately. Tuck that up inside. That's a twig bundle. That's all there really is to it. Take my lighter, get up in there, put it against the bark. Starts to ignite. The oils inside the birch bark start to burn. Hold it up in the air above your waist for a while, because this is where the drier air is. The cooler, damper air is closer to the ground. So hold it up for a moment. And in raining weather and cold weather, this is where I like to light my fires, up here. And then once I have an established flame, which means there's flames coming out of the bundle at a steady pace, that's when I trust it enough that I can put it on the ground. And then I can start to build my fire onto that. So it's pretty straightforward, and you can see established flame also means that it's not going to go out from wind. That almost went out, so it's not established yet. We gotta let it burn for a moment. Let it keep smoldering and sizzling, popping away. Once it gets these twigs going, we should have a good fire. There we go. There we are. Now we're starting to get an established flame, and if I move it around, all I'm doing is making the fire get bigger. So I'm going to place that in my little fire pit here. Pretty straightforward, huh? So while that gets ready to start burning, I'm going to go get some water, gather some balsam fir needles, have some tea.